The drum beat is getting a little bit louder now that the Angels are flipping out of contention for even a wild card spot of, hey, what do the Angels do with Shohei Ohtani? I think you and I, if we sat here just in our rational minds, that if we were GMs of this team, we would understand that the best thing for the franchise overall would be to get something back for Shohei as opposed to just let him walk. We could say, oh, he's going to get compensatory picks, but we know how baseball picks work. Like it's not like NFL first round picks, right? I mean, it is hit and miss, certainly. So you want something in return. Do you think this is actually going to happen? Do we think we see Shohei Ohtani in a different uniform at some point this season?
I think the percentage chance is pretty high. I wasn't thinking that like Washington was necessarily going to trade Soto. And of course, it's two different organizations, two different situations. But I'm certainly more open to teams trading these big pieces now, understanding that if they're just going to lose them, like you said, and get nothing, that is way more damaging than taking that kind of massive PR hit of, wow, we traded this guy. You know, Boston tried to do the same with Betts. They flopped on that. They also are Boston. They have no reason to have to not pay somebody like a Betts. But, you know, we've seen it work on the negative end there. I do think Nats fans, as much as they love Soto and as great as he is, they realize how far away they were and have some favor toward that Soto trade, at least in terms of the way it's looking with some of the returns that they got. You know, Gore pitching pretty well this year at times. You've got James Wood as a big-time prospect, Robert Hassel. So it really depends what they can get to. It is still a rental of Ohtani, but it's one of the greatest players we've literally ever seen. So it still has to be a pretty massive return. I think they really, really, really have to entertain it. They got to see what the offers are out there. It's just such a mess right now with them. You know, Trout back on the IL, them fading again after a decent start is the same old story, Groundhog Day over there. So before he walks, because we know they're not going to sign Ohtani, they do need to consider trading him.
Yeah, and I think what we look at here, you certainly remember when Shohei was coming over here, the landscape has changed as well, because if you listen to people, we don't really hear directly from the horse's mouth and stuff like this, but we hear people who are close to him who we know when he came over, the Angels were just a benefit of location, geography, right? He wanted to be on the West Coast, and that narrows down, you know, a vast majority and eliminates a ton of the teams. From what we're hearing is maybe that whole needing to stay on the West Coast thing might be kind of fading a little bit, and he might be opening to signing basically anywhere. And if that's the case, it is a rental, Paul, but it's also like, hey, you can kind of get your foot in the door as well, right? With that. And so I think that's another thing that some of these teams have to consider.
Yeah, I think the most serious teams on the trade should be the ones that are looking to sign him. Now, you do have to pay trade capital and then the contract, but you're also getting 2 months of him in October if you're a true contender. So there's a lot of benefits there. The price is really what's going to drive it. It's going to be substantial. You're not getting away giving some poo-poo platter of mid and low tier prospects. There's going to have to be a big A+ piece in there to make it worth it for the Angels. But I do think it is going to be worth it for a team to do that. And obviously there's been so much chatter about the Dodgers. They kept their powder dry this year for Ohtani. They're still a remarkably stocked farm system. They could do the deal and, of course, get the contract done next year. There's not a ton of teams that can do that, but obviously those are the teams that should really be involved here. I think if you just rent him with the, fully thinking that it's going to be a rental and we're not really going to competitively try to sign him next year, I worry about that because the draft capital is going to be, or trade capital is going to be substantial for Ohtani.
So, Paul, from a betting standpoint here, I mean, he is the overwhelming favorite to win the MVP, but there is a non-zero chance that a National League team could, in fact, make the trade for him. I mean, we know that at least the Mets have been floated out there. You just mentioned the Dodgers. There's a couple of other teams as well who knows when it's all said and done. So what would then the American League MVP market look like, in your opinion?
A free-for-all, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, you start talking Robert, Franco, a Texas guy, whether you're Semien, Adolis Garcia has the WAR. He's up there in that mix. I am more of a Semien guy. I think a Jose Ramirez puts himself back in the picture. Then you got guys on all these teams that are either fully in competition or fringe competitors, and the narratives are going to be written down the stretch. It becomes such a wide open field. I don't even know who I'd handicap as the top guy. If you're just going straight Fangraphs for it, it's Luis Robert by a shred, 0.1. That's literally nothing with over Wander Franco. So, and that's, that's a competitive team and a non-competitive team, which I don't believe that the MVP can be on I believe they can be on a bad team if they're the best player, because it's just the most valuable. But we know those narratives get written where it can lean away from the guy on the lesser team, especially if he's not heads and shoulders above. That becomes a tiebreaker that works in the favor. So I would start to look at the Rays and Rangers guys and kind of pick my favorite from there. And maybe you do it early here on a spec with like a quarter or a half unit bet, in the hopes that Ohtani gets dealt, because obviously the prices are going to change drastically the moment he's dealt out of the American League, if and when he is. I think it also changes the Cy Young market a little bit. Ohtani's not the favorite for the Cy Young right now, but he's in the mix. So that would also alter those that bet market as well.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.